Special guest on tonight's The Listening Post is the man wearing the big hat that says RSLWA. He's laughing at me. I'll tell you, he's laughing at me. It's Peter Aspinall. Peter, welcome once again to The Listening Post.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Tony. I'm more than happy to share the Christmas festivities with you.
And I'm going to ask you to do that, and I'm going to ask you to take the RSL hat off for the moment, because I want to ask you, have you any recollections of, during your military time, of Christmas? And if so, how did you celebrate?
Well, actually I can. During my service in South Vietnam in 1966-67, Christmas time 1966, I was serving as a forward observer with Bravo Company of 5 Battalion, 5 RAR. And we happened to be in the base camp at Nui Dat on Christmas Day. And all of the officers of the battalion, and that included the attachments like myself, we actually served Christmas dinner to the other ranks of 5 RAR in a big battalion mess.
And did you have any of the men snap their fingers and say, "Boy"?
Not quite, but but there was certainly frequently beckoning to replace empty cans of beer.
So, on the more serious side of that celebration, what was, do you think, the general feeling of both officers and men about being so far away from home for Christmas? Is there a big psychological jump that has to be made?
I'm now trying to remember back, of course, more than 50-odd years ago. But no, my recollection was that the diggers themselves, happy is probably not the right word to use, but they certainly were enjoying the fact that there was the commemoration and celebration of Christmas. And that the commanding officer, Colonel John Waugh, had made quite an effort through his senior officers in the battalion to make sure that all of the diggers, as many as possible, took part in the lunch and were able to participate in a way that didn't require them to go back to duties after the lunch was over. There was a minimum number of diggers in each of the companies that obviously had to be there for security reasons, but nonetheless the vast majority of the battalion were there, and that was the officers and the senior NCOs.
So I know...
Sorry, serving. But they were, yes, clicking their fingers. I think probably they did that to the RSM, to the commanding officer and to the second in command. But John Waugh was a lovely man, apart from being a very effective commanding officer. He was a charming man in his own right.
I know this is a banal thing to say in some ways, but a leader who has humanity is a great leader. A leader without humanity can't lead anything.
Well, John was quite unique in many ways. He was a teetotaler to start off with. But he could be in a group of either diggers or amongst them, say, junior officers. He would drink Coca-Cola, and he would drink as much Coke as they drank beer, and he would appear to be just as intoxicated as they would, except it was on Coke.
Now, let's come forward right to 2019. So how is Peter Aspinall and family, how will you be celebrating in the next couple of days, Christmas Day?
Well, Carol and I will be on our own. My 2 children live up in the Blue Mountains, so they're well and truly on the other side of Australia. But look, we love it. It's a day, just to reflect. In my case, reflecting back over a life which has included some 30 years in the Army and some very, very close acquaintances who are no longer with us. And I know Carolyn will do very similar things with her side of the family. But no, we just treasure the fact that we were able to have Christmas on our own. Now, that's not being isolationist, but we love it.
You're on your own, but that means you can think about as many different people as you care to.
Indeed, and you're so right. As I say, I do genuinely think back to 2 or 3 in particular that I was very close to over the years in the Army, because in the Army like, say, the corporate world. You make hundreds of acquaintances, but you make very, very few really close friends. And out of my army days, there are about 3 or 4, and unfortunately all but 1 or 2 of them have gone.
Exactly. Well, now, we've sort of spoke about Christmas past, and we've talked about you celebrating this year. So for you, Peter Aspinall, before you put your RSL hat back on, a Christmas carol.
Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright.
You're with Capital Radio 101.7 FM and Capital Digital here in Perth, Western Australia, approaching Christmas with Peter Aspinall, the President of the West Australian branch of the RSL. Peter, now 2016 you donned the hat that I keep talking about as President. Over that time, what do you see as the constructive element of your reign? And I know, because I know you'll be giving credit to a lot of other people, but just think of yourself. Where are you saying, that's good?
I think the main thing has been establishing the financial viability of RSLWA. My predecessors always had the disadvantage of deficit budgeting every year, always worrying about where the next dollar was going to come from, and the limitations that imposed upon any of the initiatives they wanted to undertake. As you know, we sold our aged care business in 2010. There was an ongoing issue over whether we got fair value for that, and we eventually did achieve somewhere approaching fair value. And that has given us a financial security that we now enjoy. Because of that, we can now look to what are the things that we can actually start implementing by way of services to veterans and their families. So I guess, Tony, looking back over those now getting on towards 4 years, I think the greatest success that I can see RSLWA has made for itself is the ability to now start achieving greater support and greater services for veterans and their families.
Can I butt in on that? Did you have much opposition, either amongst membership or fellow board members or what have you, for saying this is how we're going to use whatever income we get?
I'm aware there are pockets around in the membership that believe the notion of sitting on a little pot of gold, if you want to call it that, is not appropriate, and it should be there spent on the requirements of the veterans. I would argue strongly, and the analogy I would use, some may poo-poo the notion, but if you have parents who are self-funded retirees, they have a certain amount, say a few $100,000 sitting in a superannuation account. That account then generates the income, the revenue, the return on which they live. Do you suggest to them then that they should start expending the capital, which will reduce the amount that therefore they can get each year in terms of their, to support their living expenses? I put the same argument in terms of the of RSLWA. We shouldn't be out there spending our capital. We invest that wisely, and to date we have been successful. And we are now generating enough out of those investments that, not quite yet, but we're getting there. We cover all of our annual expenses for the running of RSLWA. I would suggest in 2020 we will have gone over the top of that, and we will then be putting excess income into our welfare accounts for direct expenditure on services for veterans and their families.
Talking of services for veterans and their families, in a number of interviews that this program has heard over the last few years, there seems to be a greater increase in the RSL working with other people, other agencies, other individuals, whereas possibly in the past it was let's do it on our own. Is that a true picture?
Yes, it is. Let me jump forward a little bit and talk just very briefly about the new ANZAC House, and I know that you were going to talk about that. Well, yeah. One of the features of Veteran Central, which we're calling the facility that will be housed within ANZAC House, it is on the basis that the services provided through that Veteran Central are not provided just by RSLWA. They're provided by those RSLWA, obviously, but also those other ex-service organisations that want to come in with us and be able to use the facility for them to exercise their particular service that they deliver. RSLWA can't provide every single service, and other people do certain things far better than we do. So why wouldn't we optimise the service that we can provide by offering to have those other services with us?
And now, with those other services, have you found a willing reception from the people who provide those things, saying, look, the RSL is interested in what you can do, or are people wary?
A mixture, actually, Tony. There are some that have quite openly and willingly come forward and said, yes, we want to come. And also I make the point that when you walk into the new ANZAC House, you're not going to walk into a lobby area where you'll be confronted with just RSL badges and RSL logos.
My picture, I hope.
Well...
oh, I've embarrassed him. Sorry, carry on.
It will be identified as being a multi-organisational environment, and so therefore no, RSL is not going to take the preeminent position. We will on our floor, where we're going to have our particular office facilities, but in terms of the other parts of the building, no, it'll be they'll be able to create their own image, their own obvious signage and that sort of thing.
Can you tell us about the physicality of the building for those that haven't seen plans and so on?
Yes, it's a 7-storey building, and I might add architecturally it's quite an outstanding design. The ground floor will have a reception area with a concierge, and the idea is that there is a veteran coming in, particularly a veteran coming in, say, for the first time looking for service, will be able to approach the concierge, say what their problem is, and be directed, rather than the veteran having to try and find who should provide the service. They will be guided and assisted in where to go. On the first floor will be the re-establishment of the ANZAC Club, which we used to have in ANZAC House on the old site. Then on there'll be a floor with other ex-service organisations, another floor which will be a completely equipped medical centre, and we'll have the facility for consultation rooms for a GP up to day surgery.
That is quite incredible.
It is remarkable, and what's more, it'll be there for veterans and their families, and it will be structured in a way that the usual costs that you might incur or be confronted with will actually be, they're not abolished, but they will be put through them, providing they've got a Medicare card or the appropriate DVA card. There will be no upfront cost to them at all.
So, would you say that it'll take a while for the membership to comprehend what's happening there, or has there been a good enough PR campaign amongst members?
I'm not sure that we've been quite as open yet as... bearing in mind we spent most of 2019 creating the memorandums of understanding, the partnership arrangements, etc., etc. So you really can't say this is what we're going to do unless you actually know it's going to be in place. So most of this year has been involved, been consumed by making those arrangements. And some of them still need to be bedded down and if you like, put in concrete. But we're getting there.
Can you give me any idea of the variety of other people in the building, without giving away too many secrets, Peter?
Well, I should add there's another group of people who will come in with us as well. And the medical floor is a good example of this. What we're calling veterans, veteran service providers, they're not necessarily ex-service organisations, but they are commercial or a doctor's practice, or a medical practice rather than just say a strict doctor, a medical practice, but they provide that practice for veterans and their families. So they're coming in as well, and in fact it is one of those that's establishing the whole of the medical floor. Psychiatry, psychologists, employment agencies, and we've on the verge of signing off on at least 2 employment agencies directly solely at veterans. I was going to say legal, financial. So it's really
a huge umbrella.
Broad, yes.
It must be very personally satisfying for you as president, thinking that this is happening in your time.
Oh, look, it's great, and it's the vision of a number of people. But I'd also like to compliment the board of directors of RSLWA, because ultimately, of course, they are the ones that make the decision to go ahead or not go ahead with major initiatives. But look, we've been looking at where should we be going with RSLWA now. Well, going back to basically when I first started 4 years ago.
Membership, how is that?
It's trending up. I can't say they're rushing through the door. But look, we understand that an organisation like the RSL, many of those in the services, as they separate from the services, at their age, those men and women usually have families, they have employment requirements, they have schooling issues, etc., etc. Do they have time to give to an organisation like the RSL or any other ex-service organisation for that matter? But what I'd like to think goes through their minds is that where those veterans have a requirement to be supported by services that are provided by the RSL or other ex-service organisations, providing that's done well and it satisfies them and they get good service and good outcomes. You can still have good service but not get necessarily all the best outcomes from it. But if they do that, then our belief is that ultimately when they do have time, they will then think back and say, possibly, maybe now I can give some time to replicate what I got and help other veterans coming out some 10 years, say, down the track.
Some more Christmas music for you, Peter, just for you especially, and also for anybody else who happens to be listening. But Christmas coming up very soon. We'll be back with Peter Aspinall very shortly.
Sidewalks dressed in holiday style.
In the air there's a feeling of Christmas.
Children laughing,
people passing,
meeting smile after smile. And on every street corner you'll hear silver bells, silver bells, silver bells,
silver bells.
it's Christmas time in the city. Ring-a-ling,
Oh, ring-a-ling,
hear them ring,
hear them ring.
soon it will be Christmas Day.
Strings of streetlights
Even stoplights
blink a bright red and green.
as the shoppers rush home with their treasures.
Hear the snow crunch.
See the kids rush,
There's a Saturday day.
and above all the bustle, you'll hear silver bells, silver bells, it's Christmas time in the city.
You're tuned to the Listening Post on Capital Radio 101.7 FM, and tonight our special guest for the Christmas edition is Peter Aspinall, the President of the West Australia branch of the RSL. Peter, we've talked, I think, very clearly about ANZAC House as one of the big things and what will happen there, but there are other major issues of the past that must be significant to you.
I just thought of something, Tony, and just before we come to that, I've talked about Veteran Central and those services that we're planning for ANZAC House. ANZAC House, of course, is only one location. It's in the Perth CBD, and quite rightly there will be members of the RSL out in outer metropolitan and regional areas who will say, well, hang on, what's in it for us? Apart from the fact it's there in the centre, and when they get the opportunity, of course they can use it. But our aim is to actually replicate on a smaller scale what will happen in ANZAC House in terms of the services provided. We'd like to do that in selected localities in outer metropolitan areas and selected regional centres. Now, we're already quite a long way down the track of creating one of these hubs with, as I say, scaled down but similar facilities in Busselton. And we have I won't give it away by saying where, because people will get very twitchy about it, but the opportunity is there for some other locations for us to redevelop them.
It's incredibly exciting.
Well, when you think of the technology we have available today, and telemedicine and all of those opportunities, I believe we can do it in selected regional areas in particular. And who knows, at the end of it, we may be able to do that for the community, just not necessarily for the veterans in those regional areas.
So it'd be the RSL serving the state, as it were?
Or serving that local community,
Yeah.
yes. Obviously, we would seek support out of the state government to.
Never. Yeah.
But that's the idea over time, that we will develop these regional hubs.
Right.
And out
right now to other things.
Yes. Looking back over 2019, Tony, if I could just say about 8 different things that I think we've achieved or are in the process of achieving. I did mention about the partnerships and the memorandums and joint ventures, etc. I think that's probably the key achievement that we've had, because ultimately the outcome of those arrangements are services for veterans. Doesn't matter about bricks and mortar and whatever. It's what is actually delivered to and is made available to the service person. But in no particular order. Look, for the new building of ANZAC House, the cost of it is around about $32 million. We've already raised during 2019 over $10 million by way of donations towards it, and we expect that to increase quite significantly through 2020. I'd love to say we get to a position where we completely build it with donations. Hopefully.
Might happen.
Oh yes, it's a possibility. So, and we're certainly aiming to do that. We're looking at a partnership and an arrangement to allow the development of an IT-enabled veteran service model. We believe it'll be a game changer in how we support our veterans and case managing. And it'll be on the basis of sharing, providing the veteran allows it, and it's strictly their confidential information. But if they're prepared, then we are in a position then to start sharing it across appropriate service providers to veterans. Earlier this year, we launched our Help Our Heroes program, and that was launched by a very successful ball that we held at the Crown Casino for a new boy in the block, because RSL traditionally has not been a great fundraiser. I believe we were immensely successful because we actually gained a profit out of running it, which I understand very few do the first time around, but we certainly did. I mentioned about the veteran hubs, and we're on our way. That is an achievement, and what are the prospects for the Bustleton RSL sub-branch and a hub in that area, I believe, are quite exciting, and we're getting great support out of, first of all, the Bustleton sub-branch itself. They are a tremendous group that are very active in the advocacy and welfare area, and of course that's essential for us.
Can I interrupt there, because it's given me the thought that often as I've heard, if an organisation is seen to be doing something, there is much greater interest from people to become involved than when it just exists as a club on the street.
Yes, I know that there are some who probably won't agree with me, but yes, comradeship is important. Yes, having a social environment in which people can meet and enjoy themselves is important. But I'd still come back to the fact that, in my opinion, the core purpose of the RSL is around advocacy and welfare and well-being for the veteran and their families.
Well, historically...
And sorry, part of that is that social side.
And historically, of course, you're saying that's the heritage, because that's how it all began.
It is. Go back to 1916. It was there to help those of our mates in need who came back, and to remember those who didn't. So it fits that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else that you'd like to mention?
Yes, we've developed an online toolkit to help the administrative side of, because any organisation, certainly the size of the RSL and with the sub-branches, always there is the accountability and the governance issues. So we've developed an online toolkit which is proving to be very popular and very successful. I mentioned right at the beginning, I think, Tony, that we've consolidated our financial base, and that is critical to everything. And in fact, it was also fundamental in us being able to gain our deductible gift status and PBI status. And probably the other one was, as you asked me about membership, it is growing. And it's not leaping ahead by great bounds, but it is on the increase, and I think that's quite an achievement.
It is. Can we, just before I throw you out of the studio, just want to ask a question that, because of the publicity that's been around, about a royal commission into suicides and military personnel. Firstly, is there an official RSL position, Australia-wide that is? And secondly, what's your personal opinion?
Yes, there is. The National President did put out a media release a couple of weeks ago, I think, right at the stage, late December. I think it's probably now about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And that was that the RSL generally was not in favour of a royal commission, and the National President put out some reasons for it, including, I might add, the time factor. A royal commission can take 1-2 years. Another one was the cost factor, and many millions of dollars. And I know there is a point of view that, well, that money could be better spent by going straight into programs and initiatives, but of course we know that that's not the way that the federal government works with funding such things as royal commissions. And the other one is I believe the figure is at least 5 major inquiries already in terms of suicide amongst veterans. So for that reason, we've indicated, the National President has indicated that they don't believe it's appropriate. Having said that, we know that the Prime Minister at the moment is still open about it. He's made no decision. And of course, if he did call a Royal Commission, then obviously the RSL would certainly participate appropriately. It's
a bit invidious, isn't it? Whoever the Prime Minister is, do one thing and somebody will be pleased, you do another thing and somebody else won't be.
And following that, Tony, I know the National President has acknowledged it, and certainly I acknowledge it. It's not a universal view across the RSL. There are very strong pockets who are in favour of a Royal Commission. And I appreciate their point of view. So.
Your personal, and I know you're not speaking for RSLWA, just as a person.
Personally, I'm not in favour of a Royal Commission, again for those very reasons, and not just because the National Presidents espouse them. I do think that let's get on and do it, whatever we're doing. And we are in the midst of some fairly successful programs of assisting. It is the issue around identifying and how do we get to a point where we can intervene in time with some of the unfortunate people who really are considering suicide.
Meanwhile, get on with what you're doing in assisting and saying, right, well, you know, this may work or may not, but we're going to do it.
And I've got to stress, like most people, I'm not an expert in suicide prevention, and of course we can only do what the experts in that field are suggesting, and are things that we can practically do.
And that's a good note on which to finish, I think, the term practically do, which I'm paying you a compliment, Peter, and not being funny. You know, the work of the RSL has really taken flight. And I know there's been presidents before you on whom you've built ideas and so on, but it really is an organisation that's very fit for the 21st century now. So congratulations.
Well, look, thank you, Tony, but I would also like to take this opportunity and just say to all of those veterans and their families that this time of year it's in some ways very happy, but also in other ways it can be very, very sad for a lot of them. But I just hope that all veterans and their families can get the most enjoyment that's possible out of the Christmas and New Year period, and for heaven's sake, be careful and be safe.
On earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all ye nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing,
And there you had it. That was the Band of the Scots Guards playing that number right then, and it of course was called The Gathering of the Clans. Thanks indeed to Peter Aspinall for being with us tonight. Some interesting and very important things were being said there by Peter, and it's the activity, particularly in and around what's going to happen with not only ANZAC House in the city, but in the avenues into the rest of Western Australia for the facilities and the things that ANZAC House offers. That's very, very exciting. Right, other music from the Listening Post Bandstand tonight. We had a number of numbers from Johnny Farnham, or John Farnham rather, give him his name now, and Olivia Newton-John. We had Hark the Herald Angels Sing, of course. We had Silver Bells and Silent Night. And then, of course, we also had Colonel Bogey from the Australian Army Band. And the Australian Army Band Perth, that's both Perth, the band, there is played the Vietnam Vets March as well.